What secret will you take with you to the grave, never to reveal? After my husband's death, I found empty bottles hidden all over the house. I knew he liked to drink, but I had no idea how bad it really was. I think he started losing control when he began working remotely and was home all the time. This has nothing to do with the circumstances of his death. Indeed, I don't want to tarnish his memory in front of family or friends. But sharing this with strangers feels like a kind of relief. My ex's family seriously advised me to break up with her as soon as possible because of her odd behavior. Imagine, even her own family thought it was a good idea. One time in the park, I lit a firework but panicked and decided the quickest way to dispose of it was to flush it down the toilet. Boom. The toilet officially ceased to exist. I was about 12, and that was my first and last lesson in pyrotechnics. The truth is, I didn't take a year off from university to qualify for a government scholarship. I was actually expelled because of terrible grades. But here's the irony. Now I'm in grad school, working on my PhD. Life has a funny way of surprising you, doesn't it? My college friend went an entire month without money, not even for food. He had 3 best friends, and at the time, I was dating one of them. I wasn't well off either, but I had just earned a small paycheck for some IT work at a school. Without overthinking it, I withdrew $200, put it in an envelope, and left it at his door. To this day, he still believes it was his friend Andrew. I never saw a reason to tell him the truth. It was just money, and he needed food much more than I needed to hold on to the credit. My family has a long and well-documented history, so my uncle decided to dig even deeper and trace it back to the mid-1600s. While going through some records in the German Federal Archives, he discovered a birth certificate for our grandfather, along with a few other intriguing documents. One name was completely unfamiliar to him, so he decided to investigate further. In some of the documents, the title Hauptsturmführer appeared before that name, which piqued his curiosity even more. To cut to the chase, it turned out that my great-grandfather was an SS officer and served in the Waffen-SS from 1943 to 1945 as a medic. He was involved in events in Belgium that are too grim to even talk about. What a wonderful discovery, right? Honestly, it was a shocking and completely unexpected revelation about our family's past. My dad took his own life just a few days before my birthday in October. Our last conversation was about how his ex had cheated on him. It was a heavy talk, and I had no idea it would be our last. My mental health has been far from great since then, and for the past 7 months, I've been convincing myself that it was my fault. I regret not saying something that could have changed the outcome. He didn't leave a note or any sign of his intentions. Every day, I miss him deeply and catch myself staring at the urn with his ashes sitting in the room across from me. The pain doesn't fade, and every second feels filled with his absence. I have schizophrenia. My uncle, who I've never met, was also diagnosed with it, so I'm pretty sure it's hereditary. My doctors don't know about it, and I've never told them. I'm scared they'll see me only as the schizophrenic instead of as a person. When I was 15, I tried to take my own life. At the hospital, they made me fill out a ton of forms, and one of them turned out to be a test for schizophrenia. That was the first time I'd ever heard the word, but I had no idea what it actually meant. I was shocked when I realized the symptoms described in the questionnaire weren't considered normal. I answered yes to most of the questions, but in the end, I was diagnosed with generalized depressive disorder. Schizophrenia? Never mentioned again. For years, I convinced myself that those suspicions weren't a big deal. Maybe it was just an extreme case of depression. But now I think the doctors may have missed something important, or just chose to overlook it. I have 2 master's degrees now, and I've learned to distinguish between what's real and what's not. I do everything I can to ignore the hallucinations. For the longest time, I thought the voices in my head were just part of the normal inner dialogue everyone has. Then I learned that while inner monologues are normal, having voices that don't belong to you is definitely not. I genuinely thought that's just how the brain worked. I'm almost certain that my dad helped my mom end her life. The official story is that she died by suicide, and my dad was the one who found her body. She definitely wanted to die, but I believe he assisted her and never told anyone. I found my mom's will and some of her medical documents, updated shortly before her death, all signed by both her and my dad. I also learned they had previously discussed euthanasia. They had even considered traveling to a neighboring country where it's legal. However, one condition was that the entire family, not just my dad but also my siblings and I, would have to be involved. My mom was adamantly against that. She refused to involve us in any way, let alone even talk to us about it. The idea of us knowing was completely unthinkable to her. It's been 3.5 years since her death, and I've never talked to my dad about this. I know it would be incredibly painful for him to admit, especially since he struggles to talk about anything deeply emotional. But sometimes I wonder if I should bring it up, even just to let him know I understand. When I was 7, I stole about 100 euros from my dad's wallet. I didn't even need the money. He's always been incredibly generous, buying me everything I ever wanted, and he still does. Now he's 80, and I'm 31. And he still gets me little gifts and thoughtful things that make me happy, even though he doesn't have much money. Honestly, I still feel guilty about taking that 100 euros. For years, I've occasionally slipped money back into his wallet, trying to make up for it. He's such a kind man. I just wish I'd never taken anything from him in the first place. I'm 22, and I think I'm developing a drinking problem. I enjoy staying buzzed all the time, and there's always some alcohol in my fridge. Always. Drinking runs in my family, but I'm starting to feel like I've crossed a line. The worst part? I don't want to stop. I anonymously reported my childhood best friend to Child Protective Services. She was stuck in an abusive relationship, and it was affecting her daughter. My friend had to live in a house with her hoarder boyfriend, who refused to let her clean or throw anything away. The place was so cluttered that you couldn't even open the front door, and leftover food was rotting everywhere. I didn't want to betray her, but I couldn't stand by and watch her child suffer in those conditions. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but I know it was the right one. The worst moment came when her boyfriend, in a drunken rage, shoved her while she was holding their sleeping 1-month-old baby. Thankfully, the baby wasn't hurt, as my friend absorbed the full force of the fall. She ended up with a concussion and 7 stitches on the back of her head. Her boyfriend locked himself in the house and refused to let her in, leaving their 2-month-old baby crying for hours in another room. He completely ignored the child's screams and cruelly told my friend she'd never see her daughter again. She banged on the door until her hands were raw and bloody. Desperate, she climbed the drainage pipe to a 2nd-story window and got back into the house. She left that idiot 2 weeks later but, shockingly, returned to him again. Despite all this, and countless other incidents, my friend refused to leave her partner. He kept promising he'd change and swearing his love. I'd had enough. I called Child Protective Services. When they arrived, they told her she had to leave him or she'd lose custody of her daughter. Thankfully, she chose her daughter. That was 4 years ago. Now, my friend and her little girl are thriving. Her ex is serving a 10-year prison sentence for assaulting and hospitalizing a woman he dated after her. If I had to, I'd do it all again to save that little girl. She's the sweetest child I've ever met, and she deserves to grow up in a safe, loving home. And what secrets are you hiding that you'll never share?